The Christmas lights twinkled around my grandfather's dining room as family laughter echoed through the old Victorian mansion. I was reaching for another slice of his famous pecan pie when Grandpa Frank's weathered hand gripped my wrist. His steel-gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. "Mason," he said in a voice that cut through the festive chatter like a blade, "explain why strangers are living in the house I gave you." The room fell silent. Every fork stopped midway to mouths, every conversation died. My parents, Janet and Richard, froze their faces, draining of color. My sister Qley suddenly became fascinated with her phone screen, her fingers trembling slightly. I stared at my grandfather in complete bewilderment, my mind racing through possibilities but finding none that made sense. My heart hammered against my ribs as I drove the 15 minutes from Grandpa Frank's estate to my modest two-bedroom house in suburban Denver. The December air bit through my jacket as I fumbled with my keys at the front door, my hands shaking from confusion rather than cold. Everything appeared exactly as I had left it 3 hours earlier. My navy blue sectional sat in its usual spot facing the flat-screen television. Family photos lined the mantel above the gas fireplace. My engineering textbooks remained stacked on the coffee table next to my laptop. I methodically searched every room, opening closets, and checking under beds like a detective investigating a crime scene. The guest bedroom held nothing but my exercise equipment and storage boxes. My bedroom contained only my clothes, my unmade bed, and the stack of mystery novels on my nightstand. The basement was filled with the antique furniture and collectibles that Grandpa Frank had asked me to store when he downsized 2 years ago. None of this made sense. I had lived alone in this house since graduating from Colorado State with my mechanical engineering degree. The property had been Frank's graduation gift, a gesture that had brought tears to my eyes because it represented his faith in my future. He had raised me after my father lost his job when I was 12, paying for my education and treating me like the son he never had. I pulled out my phone and accessed the security system I had installed last year after Mrs. Patterson next door reported suspicious activity in the neighborhood. The cameras covered every entrance and the main living areas. Scrolling through the footage, I saw only my own routine, leaving for my job at Morrison Engineering at 8:15 each morning, returning around 6:30 each evening, occasional weekend trips to REI for hiking gear, grocery runs to King Soopers on Sundays. "This is insane," I muttered, calling Frank back. His phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. My grandfather was not the type of man to make accusations lightly. During his 40-year career as a Denver police detective, he had built his reputation on facts and evidence. If he believed strangers were living in my house, he had to have proof. I spent the next hour photographing every room from multiple angles, creating a comprehensive record of my home's current state. The living room with its hardwood floors and southwestern decorations. The kitchen with its white cabinets and granite countertops. The bathroom with its pedestal sink and vintage mirror. Everything was exactly as it should be. But as I reviewed my security footage more carefully, something caught my attention. The timestamps on my cameras showed strange gaps during weekdays when I was at work. The recording would jump from 8:15 in the morning directly to 6:30 at night, as if someone had edited out the middle portion of each day. My blood ran cold as the implications hit me. Someone had been accessing my security system, deleting evidence of whatever was happening in my house while I was gone. I grabbed my laptop and dove into the system settings, discovering that additional user accounts had been created without my knowledge. Someone with advanced technical skills had been manipulating my own surveillance equipment against me. The violation felt like being punched in the stomach. Not only was someone invading my home, but they were sophisticated enough to cover their tracks. The question that terrified me most was simple. Who had the knowledge and access to pull off something this elaborate? Sleep became impossible that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities, until dawn crept through my bedroom windows. At 7 in the morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year, telling my supervisor I had food poisoning from the Christmas party. The lie tasted bitter, but I needed answers. My first stop was Best Buy, where I purchased 3 tiny wireless cameras designed for home monitoring. The saleswoman explained they could stream directly to my smartphone and store footage in the cloud, making them impossible for someone to delete remotely. I also bought a digital voice recorder small enough to hide anywhere. Back home, I strategically placed the cameras in locations my existing security system didn't cover, one behind a picture frame in the living room, another inside a decorative vase in the kitchen, and the third tucked behind books on my bedroom bookshelf. Each device was virtually invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Next, I examined my front door's smart lock more carefully. The device allowed me to create temporary access codes for guests or service workers, but when I checked the settings, my stomach dropped. 7 additional codes had been programmed into the system, each one linked to a different user profile. The creation dates went back 8 months, shortly after I had left for a 2-week hiking trip in Yellowstone National Park. Mrs. Patterson was tending to her rose garden when I approached her white picket fence. At 73 years old, she had lived in the neighborhood for over 3 decades and noticed everything that happened on our quiet street. "Oh, Mason, dear," she said, looking up from her pruning shears. "How was your grandfather's Christmas party?" "It was interesting," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. "Mrs. Patterson, have you noticed anything unusual at my house lately? Any people coming and going when I'm not home?" Her weathered face scrunched in concentration. "Well, now that you mention it, there have been different people around during the day. I just assumed you were having work done, or maybe renting out rooms. There's a young woman who comes and goes quite a bit, and an older couple too. Nice-looking folks. They wave when they see me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Can you describe them? The woman has dark hair about your age, maybe. The couple looks like they could be your parents, actually. Very well dressed. Oh, and sometimes there's a young man with a beard who drives a red pickup truck." Each description felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Dark-haired woman my age could be Qley. Well-dressed older couple matched my parents perfectly, and Derek, my sister's boyfriend, drove a red Chevy Silverado. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and returned home with my mind reeling. My own family was somehow involved in this violation of my privacy and property. But I needed concrete evidence before making any accusations that could destroy relationships permanently. At 10 in the morning, I implemented my plan. I backed my Honda Civic out of the driveway and drove to the end of the street, parking behind a cluster of pine trees, where my car remained hidden, but I could still access my phone's camera feeds. My hands trembled as I opened the monitoring app and positioned my phone to capture whatever was about to unfold. At 10:28, a silver Toyota Camry pulled into my driveway. My heart stopped as I recognized my mother's car. The doors opened and my parents stepped out, followed by my sister Qley and her boyfriend Derek. They walked to my front door with the confidence of people who belonged there, and my father produced a key from his pocket. I watched in horror as my own family entered my house like they owned it. They weren't sneaking or acting suspicious. They moved with casual familiarity like they had done this hundreds of times before. Derek immediately headed for my living room and turned on my television. Qley went straight to my kitchen and began making coffee in my coffee maker. My parents started examining items in my hallway like they were taking inventory. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. These weren't strangers violating my home. This was my own family, the people I trusted most in the world, systematically invading my privacy and treating my house like their personal property. I sat in my hidden car for 2 hours, documenting everything as they made themselves completely at home in my space. When they finally left at 12:45, I remained in my hiding spot for another 30 minutes, making sure they weren't coming back. The footage I had captured was crystal clear and undeniable. But this was just the beginning. I needed to understand the full scope of what my family was doing in my house and why they would betray me so completely. Over the next 3 days, I established a pattern of fake departures and covert surveillance. Each morning I would leave for work as usual, then circle back and park in different locations around the neighborhood to monitor my house remotely. What I discovered made my stomach churn with disgust and rage. My family was not just visiting my house. They were living a complete parallel life inside my walls. Qley had taken over my guest bedroom, filling the closet with her clothes and personal belongings. She had even hung pictures of herself and Derek on the walls, replacing my landscape photography with their couple selfies. When she video called friends, she referred to the house as my place and gave virtual tours like she was the homeowner. My parents had established a routine that mirrored their activities at their own home. My mother cooked elaborate meals in my kitchen using groceries they had purchased. My father used my garage as a workshop, spreading his tools across my workbench and leaving oil stains on my concrete floor. They watched my cable television, used my Wi-Fi, and even hosted Derek's parents for dinner on Wednesday evening. The most infuriating part was how comfortable they all seemed. Derek played video games on my PlayStation for hours, while sprawled on my couch in his underwear. Qley did yoga in my living room and posted Instagram photos with captions like, "Loving my morning routine in my cozy space." My mother rearranged my kitchen cabinets to suit her preferences and replaced my dish soap with her preferred brand. But the activities in my basement disturbed me most of all. My parents spent significant time down there carefully examining and photographing the antiques and collectibles that Grandpa Frank had entrusted to my care. These weren't random items. Frank had specifically chosen me as the custodian of family heirlooms that included Civil War-era furniture, vintage jewelry, rare books, and artwork that had been passed down through 4 generations. I watched through my hidden cameras as my father researched item values on his laptop, while my mother wrapped delicate pieces in newspaper. They were treating priceless family treasures like merchandise at a garage sale. When I cross-referenced their activities with online auction sites, my worst fears were confirmed. Over the past 8 months, my parents had sold over 3 dozen of Frank's most valuable possessions. A mahogany dining set from 1895 brought them $4,700 on eBay. My great-grandmother's emerald necklace sold for $2,100 to a collector in California. A first-edition Mark Twain novel fetched $1,800 at an online auction. Each sale felt like a personal assault on my integrity and my grandfather's trust. Frank had specifically asked me to safeguard these items because he believed I would honor their sentimental and historical value. He had chosen me over his own children because he trusted my character. And now those very children were systematically looting the collection while using my house as their base of operations. The financial records painted a staggering picture of betrayal. Between eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and various collectibles websites, my family had generated over $43,000 in revenue from stolen goods. They had created multiple seller accounts under false names to avoid detection using post office boxes for shipping and burner email addresses for communication. But the most devastating discovery came when I hacked into my home's Wi-Fi router logs. Every device that connected to my network left a digital fingerprint, and those logs contained cached text messages and email fragments from my family's phones. The conversations I found made my blood run cold. "We need to move faster." Read a text from my mother to Qley. "Some of these antiques are worth serious money, but Frank is starting to ask questions about the missing pieces." Qley's response was equally damning. "Don't worry. I've been researching adverse possession laws. If we can prove we've been living in Mason's house long enough, we can legally claim ownership. The key is establishing continuous residence. My father's contribution to the conversation was the most chilling. The house is the real prize. Once we get Mason out of the picture completely, we'll own property worth over $300,000 plus whatever's left of Frank's collection. They weren't just squatting in my house for convenience or temporary shelter. This was a calculated long-term scheme to steal both my home and my grandfather's inheritance. They had been planning this betrayal for months, researching legal loopholes and developing strategies to claim ownership of everything Frank had given me. The text threads revealed detailed plans to manufacture evidence of their residency, including backdated utility bills and fake lease agreements. They had even discussed having mail redirected to my address to establish legal residence. Every aspect of their invasion had been meticulously planned and executed. As I sat in my car reading these digital confessions, I realized that my family's betrayal ran deeper than simple theft. They were actively working to destroy my relationship with the grandfather, who had been more of a father to me than my biological father ever was. They were stealing not just objects and property, but the foundation of the most important relationship in my life. The scope of my family's deception became clear over the following week, as I expanded my investigation beyond simple surveillance. Using public records databases and social media monitoring tools, I traced their activities back over 12 months, revealing a sophisticated campaign of manipulation and fraud that shocked me with its calculated cruelty. My sister Qley had been the mastermind behind the digital aspects of their scheme. She had created fake social media profiles for fictional tenants, complete with backstories and photo galleries stolen from unsuspecting people's accounts. These phantom residents were designed to provide evidence that my house was being rented to multiple occupants, supporting their eventual adverse possession claim. The financial investigation revealed an even more extensive criminal enterprise. Beyond selling Frank's antiques, my family had been operating a full-scale estate sale business, using my house as their warehouse and headquarters. They had established business licenses under fabricated company names, opened bank accounts with false documentation, and created professional websites advertising estate liquidation services. Their client list included dozens of elderly residents throughout the Denver metropolitan area. My parents would approach seniors who were downsizing or whose adult children lived out of state, offering to handle estate sales for a modest commission. Then they would systematically undervalue items, sell them for far more than reported, and pocket the difference. The victims never realized they were being cheated because my parents provided falsified sales reports showing lower revenues. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchinson, an 84-year-old widow in Cherry Hills Village, had entrusted my parents with liquidating her late husband's coin collection. The receipts showed sales totaling $8,400, but my investigation revealed the actual revenue exceeded $26,000. Similar patterns emerged across 17 different estate sales over the past 10 months. But the most devastating betrayal involved my grandfather directly. I discovered that my family had been systematically intercepting communication between Frank and me for over 6 months. They had filed a change of address form, with the postal service redirecting my mail to a post office box they controlled. Important letters from Frank, including birthday cards with checks and formal notices about his estate planning, never reached me. Among the intercepted mail, I found 3 letters that made my hands shake with rage. Frank had written to inform me that he was updating his will to leave me his entire estate, valued at over $1.2 million. The house I currently lived in was intended as just the first installment of a much larger inheritance that would make me financially secure for life. My grandfather's letters expressed his deep love and pride in the man I had become. He wrote about how my integrity and work ethic reminded him of his own father, and how he trusted me to carry on the family legacy with honor. He specifically mentioned his disappointment in his biological children, my parents whom he described as lacking the moral character necessary to steward our family's heritage. The second letter detailed Frank's plans to fund my dream of starting my own engineering consulting firm. He had already spoken with his financial advisor about establishing a business development trust that would provide startup capital and ongoing support. This opportunity represented everything I had worked toward since college, the chance to build something meaningful while honoring the man who had believed in me when no one else would. The third letter was the most heartbreaking. Frank had written about his declining health and his desire to spend more time with me before it was too late. He wanted to take a cross-country road trip to visit Civil War battlefields, sharing stories about our ancestors who had fought in those conflicts. He had already planned the route and made hotel reservations, hoping to create memories that would last long after he was gone. None of these letters had reached me because my family had stolen them, terrified that Frank's generosity would leave them with nothing. They knew that his disappointment in their character meant smaller inheritances for them, so they had decided to sabotage my relationship with him entirely. The fake photographs they had shown Frank were the final piece of their puzzle. Using photo editing software, they had created convincing images of supposed drug dealers and criminals occupying my house. They had downloaded mugshots from arrest databases and superimposed them onto pictures of my interior rooms. The results looked authentic enough to convince an elderly man who trusted his children's honesty. According to text messages I found in the cached data, my parents had presented this fabricated evidence to Frank during a carefully orchestrated family meeting. They claimed I had become involved with dangerous people and was using his generous gift to facilitate illegal activities. They expressed fake concern for his safety, suggesting that my poor judgment made me unworthy of his continued trust and financial support. Frank's response, according to their messages, had been exactly what they hoped for. He was hurt, confused, and angry about my apparent betrayal of his generosity. He had immediately contacted his attorney to discuss modifying his will, potentially removing me as the primary beneficiary and redistributing the assets among his biological children. My family had successfully manipulated a decent, loving man into believing that his beloved grandson was a criminal and a disappointment. They had weaponized his trust against both of us, creating artificial conflict where none should have existed. The cruelty of this deception left me feeling physically ill, but their scheme contained one fatal flaw that they had not anticipated. Frank's detective instincts, honed over 4 decades of police work, had made him suspicious of their claims. Instead of immediately disinheriting me, he had decided to confront me directly at the Christmas party, giving me the opportunity to defend myself and potentially expose their lies. My family's greed and impatience had created the opening I needed to fight back and reclaim both my home and my relationship with the most important person in my life. Armed with overwhelming evidence of my family's crimes, I knew that my next moves had to be strategic and legally sound. The scope of their betrayal demanded a response that would not only stop their theft, but ensure they faced appropriate consequences for their actions. I could not allow them to continue victimizing Frank or other innocent people through their estate sale fraud. My first priority was reconnecting with my grandfather before their poisonous lies could cause permanent damage to our relationship. I drove to Frank's estate on a cold Thursday morning, carrying a laptop loaded with evidence and a heavy heart full of apprehension. His housekeeper Maria answered the door with a concerned expression that suggested she knew something was wrong. "Mason, dear, your grandfather is very upset," she whispered as she led me through the familiar hallways lined with family photographs. "He has barely eaten in 3 days, and he keeps asking why you would betray his trust." Frank was sitting in his favorite leather armchair in the study, staring out the window at the snow-covered garden where he had taught me to throw a baseball 20 years earlier. His usually sharp appearance seemed diminished, his shoulders slumped with disappointment and confusion. When he turned to look at me, the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "Grandpa," I said softly, "I need to show you something important. The people in those photographs are not living in my house. In fact, I can prove those pictures are fake." His weathered face remained skeptical as I opened my laptop and displayed the evidence I had carefully compiled. First, I showed him the reverse image searches that revealed the supposed criminals were actually stock photos downloaded from arrest record websites. The faces had been digitally inserted into pictures of my house using photo editing software. Next, I presented the surveillance footage from my hidden cameras, showing my parents and sister entering my house with unauthorized keys and treating it like their personal property. Frank watched in stunned silence as his own children moved through my rooms with casual familiarity, cooking meals in my kitchen and relaxing on my furniture. The financial records were perhaps most damaging to my family's credibility. I showed Frank detailed spreadsheets documenting the sale of his antiques, complete with eBay listings, PayPal transactions, and shipping confirmations. His face grew pale as he recognized items that held deep sentimental value pieces that represented generations of family history. "This grandfather's clock belonged to my great-grandfather," Frank whispered, pointing to a sold listing. "I specifically asked you to keep it safe because it represents our family's journey to America." "I never sold anything, Grandpa," I replied, pulling up my bank records to prove no auction proceeds had entered my accounts. "Mom and Dad have been stealing from the basement while I'm at work. They're using my house as a warehouse for their illegal estate sale business." The intercepted mail provided the final piece of evidence Frank needed to understand the full scope of their deception. His own letters addressed to me but stolen by his children lay open on the laptop screen. He read his own words expressing love and pride in my character, words that had never reached their intended recipient. Frank's transformation was immediate and profound. The confusion and hurt in his eyes hardened into cold fury as he realized how thoroughly his own children had manipulated him. His decades of police experience had taught him to recognize criminal behavior, and the evidence before him painted an unmistakable picture of fraud, theft, and elder abuse. "They came to me 6 weeks ago," Frank said, his voice shaking with anger. "They sat right here in this room and showed me those photographs, crying about how worried they were for my safety. Your mother actually had tears in her eyes when she told me you were putting me in danger." The cruelty of their performance made my stomach turn. They had exploited Frank's love for both of us, using his concern for my well-being as a weapon against our relationship. They had counted on his emotional response overwhelming his analytical instincts, at least temporarily. But Frank's detective training had not abandoned him entirely. He revealed that he had been conducting his own investigation over the past few days, speaking with my neighbors, and researching my background through his law enforcement contacts. Mrs. Patterson had confirmed that I lived alone and maintained the property responsibly. His police friends had verified that I had no criminal record or suspicious associations. I should have trusted my instincts, Frank admitted, reaching across to grip my hand with surprising strength. "You have never given me reason to doubt your character, not once in 28 years. I allowed their lies to cloud my judgment because I could not imagine my own children would deceive me so completely." Together we spent the next 3 hours documenting every aspect of my family's criminal enterprise. Frank's legal knowledge helped identify specific charges that could be filed, including grand theft fraud, elder abuse, mail theft, and criminal conspiracy. His attorney contacts would ensure that the case received appropriate attention from prosecutors. The inheritance letters revealed another layer to their scheme that even I had not fully understood. My family's theft was not just about immediate financial gain. They were positioning themselves to inherit Frank's entire estate by eliminating me as competition. Their adverse possession research and fake residency claims were designed to establish legal ownership of my house, which they could then use as leverage to challenge any will that favored me over them. Frank's response was swift and decisive. He immediately contacted his estate attorney to revoke all powers of attorney granted to his children and to update his security measures to prevent future manipulation. He also arranged for professional appraisals of the remaining antiques to establish accurate values for insurance and legal purposes. But our planning went beyond simple defensive measures. Frank's police background had taught him that criminals like my family would not stop unless they faced serious consequences. He wanted to ensure that their other victims, the elderly clients they had defrauded through fake estate sales, would receive justice and restitution. They have stolen from people who trusted them. Frank said, his detective instincts taking over. We have an obligation to expose their crimes and prevent them from victimizing others. The evidence we had compiled would support charges in multiple jurisdictions, as their estate sale fraud had crossed county lines throughout the Denver metropolitan area. Frank's law enforcement contacts could coordinate with prosecutors to ensure a comprehensive investigation that would hold them accountable for all their crimes. As I prepared to leave Frank's house that evening, he pulled me aside with a serious expression that reminded me of the grandfather who had taught me right from wrong throughout my childhood. Mason. He said, "What your parents and sister have done is unforgivable, but how you handle this situation will define your character for the rest of your life. We will pursue justice through proper channels with dignity and integrity. We will not descend to their level of deception and cruelty." His wisdom reminded me why I had always looked up to him as a role model. Even in the face of betrayal by his own children, Frank maintained the moral standards that had guided his entire life. He wanted justice, not revenge, and he trusted me to follow his example. The family dinner I arranged for the following Sunday represented the culmination of weeks of investigation and planning. I contacted my parents and sister separately, telling each of them that I wanted to discuss the misunderstanding with Grandpa Frank and work together to resolve the situation. My tone conveyed hurt confusion rather than accusation, encouraging them to believe they still controlled the narrative. The preparation for this confrontation required careful attention to detail. I positioned my hidden cameras to capture every angle of the dining room and living room, ensuring that no conversation would go unrecorded. I also installed new voice recording equipment in multiple locations, creating redundant audio coverage that would make the recordings admissible in court. Most importantly, I established a direct video link to Frank's estate, where he would be watching the entire dinner with his attorney present. This arrangement served multiple purposes. Frank would witness their confessions firsthand, his lawyer could verify the legal implications in real time, and law enforcement could be notified immediately when we had sufficient evidence to make arrests. My family arrived at 5:30 on Sunday evening, their demeanor a mixture of nervousness and false confidence. My mother carried a bottle of wine, and my father brought a bouquet of flowers props, designed to reinforce the illusion of a normal family gathering. Qley and Derek appeared more relaxed, perhaps, believing that their youth and perceived innocence would protect them from serious consequences. The first hour of dinner proceeded according to my script. I played the role of confused and hurt grandson, expressing bewilderment about Frank's accusations, while seeking their guidance and support. My performance encouraged them to elaborate on their version of events, providing increasingly detailed explanations of their supposed innocence. "I just cannot understand where Grandpa got the idea that strangers are living in my house," I said, watching their faces carefully for reactions. He seemed so certain, like he had actual proof. My mother's response was a masterclass in manipulative theater. "Oh, honey, you know how elderly people can get confused sometimes. Frank probably saw some delivery people or repair workers and jumped to the wrong conclusion. His mind is not as sharp as it used to be." The casual dismissal of Frank's mental acuity revealed their true contempt for the man who had supported them financially for decades. They were willing to destroy his reputation and dignity to protect their criminal scheme. My father contributed his own lies with practiced ease. "We have been worried about you, son. Living alone in that big house, working such long hours at the engineering firm. Maybe Frank is picking up on some stress or changes in your routine that you are not even aware of." Their concern felt like acid in my stomach. These were the same people who had been systematically violating my privacy and stealing from my home for months. Their ability to look me in the eye while expressing fake worry demonstrated a level of sociopathy that I had never suspected. Qley's contribution was perhaps the most disturbing because it revealed the generational nature of their deception. "Mason, maybe we should all go to Grandpa together and show him how wrong he is. We could even bring photos of your house to prove that you live alone." The irony was staggering. She was suggesting that they fabricate new evidence to counter the fabricated evidence they had already provided to Frank. Their entire relationship with truth had become so corrupted that lies felt more natural than honesty. As the main course concluded, I decided it was time to reveal my hand. I excused myself to the kitchen ostensibly to prepare dessert, but actually to activate the television and laptop setup that would display my evidence. When I returned to the dining room, I carried a tablet that appeared to contain family photos. "Before we talk about Grandpa's concerns," I said, "I want to show you all something interesting I discovered while trying to figure out what he was talking about." The first video began playing on my television screen, showing crystal clear footage of my parents entering my house with unauthorized keys. The timestamp clearly indicated a weekday morning when I should have been at work. My family's faces went white as they watched themselves moving through my rooms with obvious familiarity. "This is from 3 days ago," I announced calmly, "recorded by security cameras that you apparently did not know existed." The second video showed Qley cooking breakfast in my kitchen while wearing one of my college sweatshirts. Derek could be seen in the background playing video games on my PlayStation while sprawled across my couch in his underwear. The casual intimacy of their behavior made it clear that this was routine, not a single occurrence. My mother found her voice, first her tone, shifting from concern to desperation. "Mason, we can explain this. We were worried about you, so we have been checking on your house occasionally to make sure everything was okay. With keys that you made without my permission," I replied, pulling up the smart lock records that showed 7 unauthorized access codes. "And checking on me by rearranging my furniture and using my shower." The third video was perhaps most damaging because it showed them systematically cataloging Frank's antiques in my basement. My father could be clearly seen photographing items, while my mother took notes on their condition and estimated values. Their methodical approach proved that this was not casual browsing, but deliberate inventory preparation. The financial records I displayed next left no room for alternative explanations. Bank deposits from eBay and PayPal sales shipping confirmations for sold antiques and business licenses for their fraudulent estate sale companies created an undeniable paper trail of theft and fraud. Over $43,000. I announced, watching their faces as the scope of their crimes became clear. "That is how much money you have made selling Grandpa's antiques that he trusted me to protect." But my family's response to this overwhelming evidence shocked me with its brazen audacity. Instead of remorse or apologies, they doubled down on their deception with an even more sinister backup plan that I had never anticipated. Qley produced a folder of documents from her purse, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady with practiced lies. "Mason, we were hoping it would not come to this, but your behavior lately has been very concerning. These are medical records and psychiatric evaluations that document your mental health decline over the past year." The papers she spread across my dining room table appeared to be legitimate medical documents, complete with professional letterheads and official signatures. According to the fabricated records, I had been diagnosed with paranoid personality disorder severe anxiety, and early-onset dementia. The fictional psychiatrist recommended immediate involuntary commitment to protect both me and others from my alleged deteriorating mental state. My father's contribution to this final betrayal was delivered with the cold calculation of a career criminal. "Son, we have been living in your house because we are your court-appointed caregivers. You signed power of attorney documents last month during a psychiatric emergency, but your memory problems have made you forget." The forged legal documents he presented appeared authentic to casual inspection, complete with notarized signatures and official seals. According to their fabricated story, I had suffered a complete mental breakdown and voluntarily surrendered decision-making authority to my family. They claimed legal right to manage my property, my finances, and my medical care. Qley's phone buzzed with an incoming call that she answered with obvious relief. "Dr. Stevens, yes, he is having another episode right now. The paranoid accusations and violent threats that we discussed. Can you come immediately?" The final piece of their scheme became clear as she spoke with someone who was apparently a corrupt psychiatrist willing to sign involuntary commitment papers based on false information. They had prepared to have me declared mentally incompetent and forcibly hospitalized, eliminating me entirely from Frank's inheritance and allowing them to claim legal control over my property. "The ambulance will be here in 20 minutes, Qley announced with fake sadness. "Mason, we love you, but you need professional help. These accusations and conspiracy theories prove that you are not capable of caring for yourself anymore." Their performance was so convincing that I almost questioned my own sanity for a moment. The documents looked authentic, their concern appeared genuine, and their explanations sounded plausible to someone who had not witnessed their crimes firsthand. If I had been an outside observer, I might have believed their version of events. But they had made one critical miscalculation in their desperation to silence me. They had forgotten that I was not alone in this fight, and that their confessions were being recorded by multiple devices while being witnessed by people with the knowledge and authority to stop them. The moment my family finished revealing their psychiatric commitment scheme, I reached for the television remote and activated the final component of my plan. Frank's face appeared on the screen in high-definition broadcasting live from his estate study, where he had been watching and recording every moment of their confessions. "Hello, Janet. Hello, Richard. Hello, Qley." My grandfather said, his voice carrying the cold authority of a veteran police detective. "I have been listening to your lies for the past 2 hours, and I want you to know that every word has been recorded and witnessed by my attorney." The color drained from my family's faces as they realized the scope of their exposure. They had not simply been caught by hidden cameras. They had confessed to fraud, theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy, while being monitored by law enforcement professionals who understood the legal implications of their crimes. Frank's attorney appeared beside him on the screen, introducing himself as Thomas Morrison, a former prosecutor with 30 years of experience handling financial crimes and elder abuse cases. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just confessed to multiple felonies while being recorded with your full knowledge and consent. The evidence you have provided will support criminal charges in state and federal court." My mother found her voice, first her tone shifting from fake concern to desperate pleading. "Dad, you do not understand the full situation. Mason really has been having mental health problems, and we were just trying to protect everyone involved." Frank's response was swift and merciless. "Janet, I spent 40 years as a police detective, and I know criminal behavior when I see it. You have been stealing from your own son and lying to your own father for months. There is no mental illness here except your own moral sickness." The forged psychiatric documents that had seemed so threatening moments earlier crumbled under professional scrutiny. Attorney Morrison had already contacted Dr. Stevens, the supposed psychiatrist, who had agreed to sign commitment papers. The real Dr. Stevens was currently attending a medical conference in Seattle and had never heard of my family or their scheme. The psychiatric records are fabricated. Morrison announced, created using stolen letterhead and forged signatures. The power of attorney documents are equally fraudulent, containing legal language that would never appear in legitimate court filings. Qley made one final desperate attempt to maintain their deception. This is all a misunderstanding that got out of hand. We were just trying to help Mason manage his responsibilities, and maybe we made some mistakes in our approach. Frank's response to his granddaughter's lies was particularly painful to witness, because it reflected the death of his love for children who had betrayed him beyond forgiveness. Qley, you have been systematically stealing from me while pretending to be concerned about my welfare. You showed me fake photographs and lied to my face for months. There is no misunderstanding here, only criminal conspiracy. The sound of sirens in the distance announced the arrival of law enforcement summoned by Morrison when my family's confessions provided sufficient evidence for arrest warrants. Frank had coordinated with his former colleagues to ensure that experienced detectives would handle the case with appropriate thoroughness. Derek, who had remained silent throughout most of the evening, suddenly realized that his involvement in the scheme made him equally culpable for their crimes. I just did what Qley asked me to do. I did not know about the antiques or the fake documents or any of the serious stuff. But the surveillance footage clearly showed Derek participating in the theft and fraud with full knowledge of their illegal activities. His attempts to claim ignorance would not protect him from criminal liability as a willing accomplice in their conspiracy. The police officers who entered my house were led by Detective Sarah Williams, a 30-year veteran who had worked with Frank during their overlapping careers. Her professional demeanor and obvious respect for my grandfather lent additional credibility to our evidence and ensured that my family would be treated as the serious criminals they had become. Frank told me about this case yesterday, Detective Williams said, as she reviewed the documented evidence. We have been investigating your family's estate sale business for 3 weeks, following complaints from several elderly victims who suspected they were being defrauded. The scope of their criminal enterprise extended far beyond my personal situation. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchinson and 16 other seniors had filed complaints with the district attorney's office, reporting discrepancies between promised sale revenues and actual payments received. My family's greed had created a pattern of victim complaints that law enforcement could no longer ignore. The arrests proceeded with professional efficiency. My parents were charged with grand theft fraud, elder abuse, mail theft, and criminal conspiracy. Qley faced additional charges for identity theft and computer fraud related to her manipulation of my security systems. Derek was charged as an accessory to theft and fraud for his knowing participation in their scheme. But the most serious charges involved their systematic defrauding of elderly clients through their fake estate sale business. Each victim represented a separate count of fraud, and the total amount stolen exceeded $100,000 across all cases. These charges would likely result in significant prison sentences, rather than simple probation or community service. As my family was led away in handcuffs, my mother made one final attempt to manipulate the situation by appealing to my emotions. Mason, we are still your family. Do not let this destroy our relationships forever. We can work together to fix this situation if you just drop the charges. Her words felt like poison in my ears. After months of systematic betrayal theft and attempted psychological manipulation, she still believed that blood relationships should protect them from consequences. She had no understanding of how completely she had destroyed the trust and love that had once bound our family together. Frank's response to his daughter's plea was final and absolute. Janet, you are no longer my daughter, and Mason is no longer your son. You have chosen crime over family greed, over love and deception, over honesty. You will face the full consequences of those choices without any help or forgiveness from us. The house felt strangely peaceful after the police cars departed, and the last traces of my family's presence were removed. Frank came over from his estate to help me change the locks, and disable the unauthorized access codes that had allowed their invasion of my privacy. We worked together in comfortable silence, two men rebuilding security and trust after betrayal. "I am proud of how you handled this situation," Frank said as we finished installing new deadbolts on both doors. "You could have sought revenge or handled this outside the law, but you chose justice and integrity instead. That decision proves the character I have always seen in you." The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. My family's recorded confessions, combined with overwhelming physical evidence and multiple victim complaints, led to plea agreements that avoided lengthy trials but ensured appropriate punishment. My parents each received 4 years in state prison, while Qley received 3 years and Derek received 18 months. The restitution requirements forced them to return all stolen property and compensate their victims for financial losses. The house was returned to my complete legal control, with court orders preventing any future claims of adverse possession or fraudulent ownership. Frank's antiques were recovered from various buyers and returned to their rightful place in my basement. But the most meaningful outcome was the restoration of my relationship with Frank, stronger and deeper than ever before. The crisis had revealed the true strength of our bond and our shared commitment to honesty, integrity, and family loyalty. We spent every Sunday together sharing meals and stories while planning the cross-country road trip he had always wanted to take. Frank lived for 3 more wonderful years, during which we visited Civil War battlefields, attended baseball games, and created memories that sustained me long after his peaceful death. His will remained unchanged, leaving me his entire estate, with the confidence that I would honor his legacy with the same integrity he had demonstrated throughout his life. I used part of the inheritance to establish the Frank Morrison Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting elderly Americans from family financial abuse. The foundation provides legal assistance investigation services and emotional support to seniors who suspect they are being victimized by relatives or caregivers. The experience taught me that family is defined not by blood relationships, but by character, loyalty, and love. Frank had been more of a father to me than my biological father ever was, and his faith in my integrity had been justified by my willingness to fight for truth and justice regardless of personal cost. 6 months after Frank's death, I received a letter from my mother's prison asking for forgiveness and requesting financial assistance for her legal appeals. I returned the letter, unopened, understanding that some betrayals are too complete for forgiveness, and some relationships too damaged for repair. The house that had been the center of so much conflict became a peaceful sanctuary where I built a successful engineering consulting firm and eventually raised a family of my own. My children know the story of their great-grandfather Frank and the importance of integrity, honesty, and standing up for what is right regardless of the cost. The security cameras remain in place, not because I fear new invasions, but because they remind me daily that trust must be earned through consistent actions, and that vigilance is the price of protecting what we value most. The basement still holds some of Frank's antiques, now properly cataloged and insured, waiting to be passed down to the next generation, along with the stories of honor and courage they represent. Looking back, I realized that my family's betrayal was actually a gift that revealed the strength of my character and the depth of my relationship with the grandfather who had shaped my values. Their crimes separated the wheat from the chaff in my life, showing me who deserved my trust and loyalty, while removing those who had proven themselves unworthy of either. The lesson I carry forward is simple, but profound. Integrity is not about what we do when people are watching, but what we do when we believe no one will ever know. My family chose deception and theft when they thought they were unobserved. I chose truth and justice even when it meant destroying relationships that had shaped my entire life. That choice made all the difference, not just in the outcome of this crisis, but in the kind of man I became and the kind of life I was able to build. Frank's faith in my character was justified, not because I was perfect, but because I was willing to do what was right, regardless of the personal cost. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was betraying you behind your back? How did you find the strength to confront them and seek justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if you have ever faced a similar situation with family members or close friends. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support for standing up against family betrayal and fraud. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming deception and finding the courage to fight for what is right. And please share this video with anyone who might be facing similar challenges with dishonest family members. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the importance of integrity and justice in our relationships. Remember that blood does not make a family, character does. And sometimes, the most courageous thing we can do is walk away from toxic people, even when they share our DNA. Stay strong, stay honest, and never compromise your values for the sake of keeping peace with people who do not deserve your loyalty.